See, instead of writing extensive UX case studies, you need to do this today. Listen carefully because what I'm going to tell in this particular video is going to help you so much that you might actually finish stuff for your UX portfolio tomorrow itself. And the good part is, I've actually made a lot of my students do it in the last 5 years, and it has helped them immensely, whether they're actually preparing for job interviews, for getting a job or internship or whatever. This has actually really helped them prepare a UX portfolio even without doing extensive projects and a lot of stuff and a lot of time spent on their portfolio. And on top of it, what you're going to do is actually going to match the recruiter's expectations, because ultimately, if you want to get hired, you need to showcase examples of your potential, your work. So what we're going to do today, the advice which I'm going to give you today, is going to make you directly get into what they're actually looking for in your UX portfolio. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to talk about 3 important misconceptions which usually block people from putting stuff in their UX portfolio. And I'm also going to give you 3 very important action items which you can act on right from today itself. See, let me tell you why this is a big blocker in the first place, right? So all of us really want to have a great portfolio. We really want to have a good UX portfolio, and always we are blocked on actually finishing it. Let me know in the comments how many of you have actually not really finished your case studies and all that stuff, and it's pending from a long time for your UX portfolio. All of us are in this situation, right? I've also been in that situation many times, and a lot of my students literally are right now in that situation as well. The biggest blocker over here is they think that they have to put a lot of effort into actually writing case studies which they think the industry requires. But is it really true that you need to put in so much effort to represent your thought process? Is it really true that it actually takes months and months of efforts to actually put something to have a great UX portfolio? Not really. See, the first misconception is people generally think that they need to follow a complete rigid UX process for all their UX projects. What really happens is they think that, hey, you know what, my project, whatever the latest work which I have done in UX, people generally think is I have not really followed a complete UX design process. I think there is this rigid UX design process, a 7-step process which exists out there. I have not followed it for my previous project, and therefore this project is not fit for actually going into my UX portfolio. This is one of the biggest misconceptions, because you need to understand one thing. In reality, as UX designers, right, I'm also working as a UX designer in a very reputed company, and I also know a lot of people, my colleagues, multiple other people who are actually working in really, really very good positions as UX designers, product designers. And let me tell you, not all their projects are actually completely full-fledged, or not all their projects are actually going to be in such a way that they follow a rigid UX design process. None of us behave in this particular manner. We actually understand what is the situation which we are in, what is the problem which we are trying to solve, what is the impact which we want to have to the business, and basis that we own how we want to solve a problem. So firstly, get out of this misconception that every project requires you to follow a completely rigid UX process. And next comes the second misconception, very huge misconception, that all projects need to be full-fledged projects. Huge projects. Small projects are not allowed. I need to do something which is so extensive that I need to have started the whole project right from scratch. The design shouldn't have existed before, the product shouldn't have existed before, and I should have finished it up to an extent where I've created an entire product which the entire business is solely relying on. You need to really understand this is not how real work happens in companies. Just like how we do not follow rigid UX processes for every project, we also do not do just ideal textbook projects for everything which we do. Yes, it can happen sometimes that when you are getting started in your career, or let us say you are learning design, it is good to sometimes take a big project where you want to create an entirely new product right from the scratch and finish. But this is really like some practice. But that doesn't mean every project needs to be that. And the worst part is you don't have to wait until you did this kind of a full-fledged project to actually write about your skills and yourself in your UX portfolio. You don't have to wait. And then comes the third and a very, very, very important misconception. This misconception, I have seen a lot of portfolios, a lot of people do this mistake as if someone is actually making them do this. Probably someone is making them do this. I don't know. But anyway, listen to this very carefully. The misconception is people think they have to explain UX processes in their case studies. So what happens is, let us say they go to an interview or something and people come and say, hey, you know what? We really want to understand what is your thought process. What is the process, design process that you have followed? What they understand from it by misconception, what they understand, what students really understand from this is, oh, you know what? I need to talk about the process. They don't understand it as their process. They understand it as the process, the framework. So let me go and now explain that framework. For example, they have picked something like a double diamond process. They go and explain what double diamond process is in their case study. They explain about what is divergence, what is convergence, what is this define, what is this empathize, or let us say design thinking process. Like they go and explain, oh, this is what empathy is, this is what define is, this is what testing is. They go and explain the process. You need to understand one thing. Why will a recruiter or why will a senior designer, anyone who is hiring, why would they want to learn about the design thinking process reading your case study? It doesn't make sense, isn't it? So you need to understand that you should not end up writing about these processes or explaining things about those frameworks and stuff in your case studies. Instead, you need to talk about what is that you did. When they ask you about what is your design process, you need to literally tell a story of what you did. You did. The story of what you did. Right? Which is what really now brings us to the action items. I will give you 3 action items which will really help you actually write stuff for your portfolio today itself. So before we get into these 3 points, there is something which is important for us to understand. Oh, by the way, if you're not already taking notes, start taking notes from now onwards. Also, are you already subscribed? If not, please go and subscribe and hit the like button of this video. Right? Okay, now, see the point is, firstly, what will you write into these case studies or presentations or whatever, or let us just say documents, or let us call it articles for now, right? I'll just call this as articles, right? So the articles which will actually go into your portfolio, what will you write? Note down this point, you will be writing stories. Yes, all of us are very interested in stories, right? You have been very interested in telling stories. All those excuses you have always been giving in school, at work, stories. Yeah, all of us are very natural storytellers. So it's important for us to tell stories because stories engage people. Stories are what make others empathize the people who are telling these stories, right? If a recruiter has to empathize you, you need to tell your stories. So what I will do now is I will tell you these 3 points which will actually help you in understanding what kind of stories you can write for these articles which will go into your portfolio. Okay, the first one. The first kind of story is what I call as the rags to riches. No, not rags to riches. It's actually called as a story of where you went from ambiguity to clarity. Firstly, let me explain what this is. While you are solving a UX problem, you yourself might have noticed that there are a lot of situations where you are in ambiguity. You don't know what to do. You might not have understood the problem very well. You are not really clear about the data which you have. You don't know what kind of steps to take from that point onwards. Ambiguity. By the way, there's a very important learning that UX designers actually are in ambiguity. If you have a misconception that all UX designers, great UX designers out there are not having any ambiguity at all, they have 100% clarity about everything they do, you are mistaken. Our job itself is to actually go from ambiguity to clarity. Anyway, so you might have, if you recollect from whatever work you have done, even if it's just a one screen project or something like that, you might have been in that small ambiguity, right? You need to pick a story of what was that ambiguity and what is that you did to come out of that ambiguity to some level of clarity. And here clarity need not necessarily mean absolute truth, clarity where everyone thinks this is perfect. No. Ambiguity to probably lesser ambiguity, right? A lesser ambiguity is more clearer version. That's it, right? So pick up some story like this. For example, what I'll do is I will utilize a student project which I have recently given, where people had to design packages for Airbnb, pre-made packages and customized packages for Airbnb. In this, I will take an example situation, right? Let us say you have to introduce this packages feature. So you are in this ambiguity of where do I introduce packages? Do I actually go to this search and put it there? Do I actually put it in one of these subnav items? Do I actually introduce packages after actually going and selecting a property and make people create packages from there? You don't know, right? So from this ambiguous situation, you did something to actually get some clarity on building your hypothesis on where should probably packages start. Now, particularly in these stories where you're talking about going from ambiguity to clarity, it really helps if you talk about where did this clarity come from. Sometimes it can happen that you are actually going and doing some competitor research, right? You're looking at a bunch of competitors, you understand patterns, and you understand some of the decisions which competitors have taken, like how some of the students have done over here. If you see, there are a lot of screenshots which they have kept from multiple competitor apps, right? So looking at what competitors are doing might have given you some clarity. Some of those questions which you wanted answers to, you will have answers like, oh, probably I think it should be there in search. Oh no, it looks like packages is a very important feature. I think it can probably there right in the homepage where, like, packages needs to be literally be evident on the face, right? So that's one method, right? Or probably you might have actually gone and read some articles about the importance of packages or the business it can give. Or it could have also happened that you found an article on the internet where, for example, look at this article. It says that for Airbnb, these icons become very important for promoting some of the new categories. So this article is actually giving you the confidence that, hey, you know what? Probably if this is working for Airbnb, I can introduce a new icon over here to introduce these packages, right? So in this way, what is it that you have done with your common sense, right? I'm not even talking about any of those rigid UX processes over here, right? You yourself might have done these kind of things, and that's the most important part of this video, of the message which I'm trying to say over here is you have done all these things. You have taken these kind of decisions. You actually have these stories. You're just waiting to build a very, very big story which you never actually finish. But coming back, you've actually done these things where you were in that ambiguity and you did few things, probably looked at competitors, did some research, or you spoke to peers, or you yourself got clarity because you understood the problem in a much better manner and you came to some clarity about something. And these things can become very interesting stories for your articles. But it doesn't stop here. There is more. And you know what? We're actually talking about stories. And this is where the second point becomes very interesting. Let us say I ask you, hey, tell me a story. Like a kid, tell me a story. What will come to your mind? You will generally say, once upon a time, there was a king who had this 7 sons, blah, 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 blah. Right? Anyway, coming back, the point is, notice this, how in the story, you are actually starting with one kind of a person. Like here, it's a king who's trying to actually experience something. You are actually taking a point of view of a person who is experiencing something. Thank God we are user experience designers. That means the work which we do is actually providing an experience for users. So why not build some stories where you're actually taking the point of view of an example user who is experiencing some of the features which you have built? And that's where the second tip is really, really interesting. That is, you need to actually write down stories of the journey of a user. Let us not be really confused about what a journey is. Let me just explain it with common sense to you. Let us say you have actually taken a train journey previously. If I say, hey, please tell me your experience of going to, let us say, Goa in train, what will you tell me? You're like, hey, you know what? I actually came to the train railway station. The compartment was not really clean. I had a bad experience. But actually, I went and I was looking through the window and I had a great experience. So, in this manner, if you understand, in these stories which you tell about a journey which you had, it becomes a journey because you're describing the actions which you have done along with the emotions and the thoughts and the decisions which you have taken. That's it. So the good part is, as user experience designers, we design these journeys for our users. You need to tell those stories. That's it. Simple. So all you need to do is, let me actually explain it through an example over here. If you see, what my students have done is, to explain the feature over here, they've actually taken an example user called Shreya and going in the journey of Shreya, which means they're telling what Shreya is doing. Hey, Shreya is clicking on this packages, going and searching Mumbai, and going and getting a page where she can actually go and find some packages in Mumbai and stuff. But on top of it, they're not just leaving it with what Shreya is doing, but they're also writing what Shreya is actually feeling and thinking. Mumbai, I'm coming here, I'm very excited about it. Oh, looks like this package is very interesting. Oh, I don't think this stay is very comfortable, right? This looks very congested. Look at how they've actually documented what they think is the point of view of an example user and the experience they will have because of the product which they have designed. But, you don't have to be overwhelmed, because as I told you, I promise that you will be able to write these stories and articles today itself. And therefore, the very, very good part about journeys is a journey need not be completely full-fledged. You know what? You can tell me a story about how you just entered the train and sat in your seat and what all happened between that. You can do that, right? Or you can also tell me a story about how you actually started from your home, took a train journey and went to Goa and did a lot of stuff. That's the good part about journeys. They can actually start anywhere and end anywhere. That's the same thing which you'll have to do with your UX projects as well. Here, you could just have selected that, hey, you know what? I will start my journey from my user actually looking at stays and deciding which stay she will actually go and take. That's it. You can define the scope of your journey, of the user's journey, and tell only that part as a story. And the very, very good part is you have actually done these kind of things. You might not have conceived the entire journey of a user, but you have actually done a lot of small micro parts in your UX projects. And that is why you can actually start writing this story for your users, for your project today itself. Where are we? So the first tip you got was stories about going from ambiguity to clarity. The second tip was about stories about going and telling some micro journeys which you have created for the users in their point of view. And you know what? This leads to the third point, which is very, very interesting, because who did all these things? You. You did it. To do all these things, you've actually taken a lot of decisions for your project. You agree, right? You have taken a lot of decisions on your previous UX project. Now, all I'm saying is this only. The third point is tell stories about the decisions you have made. You have made a lot of decisions. Pick a few important decisions, few critical decisions of what you have done and tell stories of them. That's it. Very simple. Let's actually get into an example. Okay. My wonderful students, when they were solving this project, let me go into an interesting decision. Nice. So why we have decided on suggestions of experiences at their stays. So they've taken a decision of actually going and saying, hey, you know what? You have not picked any activity or an experience for that particular day. You only have stay. If at all they have not taken it themselves, they're actually suggesting these experiences to people, identifying where the slots were empty. And the interesting part about the decision which they have taken over here is they've not only thought about how can we maximize the experience for the user while they are at this stay, but they've also thought about how is it that they can increase the average order value of this entire booking, a business impact which they are proposing for doing this entire project, right? Look at the beauty. You yourself have also taken these kind of decisions. You have thought in terms of the business, you have thought in terms of the users, and you have taken these kind of decisions. You have come up with these kind of features. And all you have to do is just talk about them. Because when you talk about these things, look at how beautiful they're actually coming out. Your recruiters, the people who are trying to hire you, will directly get into the way you are thinking and the way you can actually impact their business if you join them tomorrow. That's the beauty. Let me go to another example. Here they have decided to actually add an option to change the stay. They've thought that, hey, you know what? Why should they just stick with whatever stay option is there for multiple days? Why don't we allow them to choose their own stay within the limitations of what is actually possible over here? And they've written about it, right? A very common sense decision, but they've taken this decision and they've written about it. It might feel very obvious and they've written the obvious. And it is so beautiful because it proves that they can take these kind of decisions. Wow, that's why I am really proud of my students. Right? So, let me tell you, you've seen these examples, and there is one thing, one emotion which you're all getting right now, that is, I can also do this. I just can tell these stories. I've also thought about all these things. I have actually gone from ambiguity to clarity. I have taken the point of view of a user and I've taken a lot of decisions. So, therefore, I can talk about them today. I can tell about individual stories and write them as small articles, specific articles today itself. Yes, that is all what is required. You don't have to sit and write extensive case studies of your entire project. You don't have to get there. Just go and tell stories of these things which you have learned in this particular video. That's it. Just start by establishing what is the problem you try to solve and directly jump into these stories. Very simple. Think of it like a magazine. Think of it like a newspaper. Headings. How is it that I have discovered the position for packages in this complete web of navigation over here? Interesting. I would want to read more about it. Another heading could be, look at how Shreya finally decides what experience to add in the stay which she is having in Mumbai. Great, that's a great story. And another newspaper heading over here can be, this is how I have decided to actually suggest experiences on a particular day when they have not selected any. In this manner, all you need to do is just write multiple newspaper articles, put them all together, and they will serve as a great resource for your portfolio, because your recruiters are literally looking for your thought process, your organic thought process. Industry is fed up by looking at all those formula portfolios, a lot of those design processes which are not really making sense. A lot of those portfolios literally blabber a lot of jargon and do not use any common sense and do not provide any specific examples of what is the actual UX work we will do if at all you join that particular company. But these stories, these examples which I have given you right now, and these stories are very easy to write. You have done those things, they go very specific and they talk to the recruiter directly in terms of what you can do tomorrow if you join their company. And when you write these stories, the next very important question which comes to your mind is, how do I make these stories very engaging? And for that reason, what you need to do right now is go and watch this particular video where I talk about how to make your stories very engaging by actually doing a very fun exercise of trying to explain about multiple items in decathlon and teaching a very important lesson about coming up with very engaging stories. Go, finish watching that and get started into writing these articles, and tomorrow showcase your portfolio to me. Thank you very much.